What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so before I get into this video, I want to give a shout out to the brother Endo Kenzo for the donation to the channel via the PayPal. Much respect to you for showing love to Too Raw for TV. And he had a video request. And his video request was basically, the way I interpret it was he wanted me to, I guess, take each decade and look at the best players for each decade. I'm assuming by position. And if you take the best players by position and put them in a tournament of sorts, who would win in this tournament? Now, some of this, excuse me, got to deal with how you look at this. Like, I'm assuming you mean like starting fives, right? Center, power forward, small forward, shooting guard, point guard. So that's how I interpreted that. And then I think you meant too, like, or at least I'm trying to figure out exactly what rules, what are the rules we're using. So I guess maybe 90s rules, right? Are we using 90s rules, or are we playing basketball by the standard in which they play today? Like, what rules are we using? So this is how I guess we could look at it. You could do it something like this, where the team that's, well, I don't know if you could do it like that, because I mean, if it's a tournament, it's a one-off. So I can't even do it like a series. So I guess it's a compromise. Let's just interpret it like they're playing like in 80s, 90s rules, right? Although I know people that's like, they love this era, we're like, oh, there you go with that bullshit. But it is what it is. So look, before I get into all of that, right? These are the teams. Now, me, I start with the 40s. I know most people start with the 50s because that was the first full decade, but the NBA started in 1946, for all intents and purposes. Even though technically it started in 1949, the start of the NBA is considered 1946, right? Generally. So my starting line for the 1940s, which is from 1946 to 49, would be at center, Ed Sadowski. Power forward, I'll put Jim Pollard there, even though I know he generally plays small forward. Small forward, Joe Fulks. Shooting guard, Max Zaslavsky. Point guard, Bob Davies. Right? Now, let me say this. I have all the respect in the world for these players right here. These are the pioneers. These are the guys that were hardened by oftentimes World War II. When you look at a lot of these players served in World War II, which is enough trauma to age anybody 10, 15 years, right? So these players served in the greatest war and considered, and a lot of them served their country in World War II. Also, a lot of these individuals as kids went through the greatest economic crisis we've ever experienced in this country, the Great Depression. So this was a hardened generation, and I have all the respect in the world for them. But I think we can cross these players out. They will not be able to compete with the later generations of players. So 1950s, the players are getting bigger. The players are getting stronger, a little bit more athletic, because now there's an established league. So players who, or great athletes, are now priming to play in athletics, rather than in the early 40s. A lot of these guys were in these established pro leagues that weren't necessarily large organized leagues. So anyway, the 1950s have George Mikan at center, power forward Bob Pettit, small forward Paul Arizin, shooting guard Bill Sharman, point guard Bob Cousy. Now, I think that we would all agree that that was a huge, infinite upgrade over the 40s, but I don't think that they'll be able to compete with the latter teams. You know, maybe there'll be some games where if their outside shot is going, maybe with Pettit or Arizona Sharman, they can be somewhat competitive, but I don't think they're gonna. So we can cross these guys out. I think the '60s is when we really start seeing competition, right? Now I also realize that if this is a tournament per se, this isn't exactly even because there are 9 teams. So maybe there's a team that's idle. Maybe the team that is considered probably the best. Which team would that be? I don't. Maybe you could argue. I tell you what. Let's make it today's current crop, the 2020s. At center, Jokic. Power forward, I have Giannis. Small forward, Jason Tatum. Shooting guard, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Point guard, Luka Doncic. You know, that's how I have the 2020s best player at per position. Let's have that team idle. The 1960s is at center, Wilt Chamberlain. Power forward, Bill Russell. Small forward, Elgin Baylor. Shooting guard, Jerry West. Point guard, Oscar Robertson. All-time legends. Um, so what's the make of that? 1970s, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Elvin Hayes, Julius Erving, Pete Maravich, Tiny Archibald. 1980s, Moses Malone. I went with Charles Barkley. Even though you could make an argument, go with Kevin McHale, I went with Charles Barkley, Larry Bird, Michael Jordan, a young Jordan, Magic Johnson. Also, Michael Jordan is the only guy that appears on my all-decade team, decades list more than once. So we said again to the 80s. Moses Malone, Charles Barkley, Larry Bird, Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson. The 90s, Akeem Olajuwon, Karl Malone. I went with Scottie Pippen, although peak, you could argue Grant Hill, but I went with Scottie Pippen, Michael Jordan, John Stockton. The 2000s, Shaquille O'Neal, Tim Duncan, Paul Pierce, Kobe Bryant, Jason Kidd. 2000 teens, Dwight Howard, Anthony Davis, LeBron James, James Harden, Steph Curry. Now, I know there could be other players you could go with other than James Harden. You could even argue Dwayne Wade, but I'm not sure if we got the best of Wade in the 2000 teens. But you could put Wade there, but I went with James Harden. So man, I don't really know who would win. Honestly, I don't know. I don't know who would win in a tournament with these players. If we're going by the rules of the 90s, right, then it's important to have a great big man, right? And each one of these teams have a great big man. And I'm looking at the rosters. Now, if we're going by the 90s, it's important in 2000s. It is important to have some shooting. The 60s team sort of lacks shooting outside of Jerry West. Jerry West could knock him down. Looking at the 70s, Pete Maravich could knock him down. The 80s team lacks outside shooting. The 90s team has Stockton who can knock him down. Jordan, by that point, could knock him down, but that wasn't the staple of his game. Pippen could knock him down. 2000s, Kidd could knock him down. Bryant could knock him down. Pierce could knock him down. 2000 teams, you have Steph Curry, James Harden. Obviously, those guys are prolific three-point shooters. Although I think Harden's a little bit overrated in that aspect because he's more of a prolific three-point shooter, but he doesn't necessarily shoot them in high abundance. Luka, Shai, Tatum, they could shoot threes, but if we're playing by the 90s rules, where it's not quite as important, man, I'm gonna tell you something, man. This 2000s team is really screaming at me with Shaq, Tim Duncan, Paul Pierce, Kobe Bryant, and Jason Kidd. You also got to look at how these guys would mesh with each other. They're like a really strong team. It's hard to bet against Chamberlain and Russell. Elgin Baylor is great. But, Wilt probably would have to resort to playing more like his Lakers self. Baylor and West would have to be scorers. Oscar would have to cut down his shot attempts. Chamberlain and Russell make one hell of a formidable front court. You know what? The hell with it. I'm going 1960s. I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to go with the team of Wilt Chamberlain, Russell, but with those guys playing more like defensive anchor rebounders. Elgin Baylor, Jerry West, Oscar Robertson. Fuck it. I'm going with that team. I'm going to go with them. And I know nobody's going to go with them, but I'm going with them. And this is a guy that loves the Bulls and Michael Jordan, but I'm going with them. I think these are guys that were playing 40-some minutes a night in Chuck Taylors in the fastest pace era in the league. These guys were battle-tested, hardened, gave everything they got. Look at some of those old-timers games in the 1980s and early 90s before they shut it down due to legal reasons and, and liability reasons. Look how hard these guys were playing in their late 40s and 50s. Look how hard these guys are going out there competing and compared to how these guys play today, especially in the All-Star game. I'm going with the 60s team. I'm going with them. I think Wilt, Bill Russell, Baylor, West, Oscar will get it done. 70s team is great too. Matter of fact, I'm going to go with 60s team competes with the 90s team in the finals, and ultimately they beat the 1990s team and get the respect that truly deserve. And, but I know that's never going to be the consensus here, but that's how I look at it. But tell me what you guys think.